in 2011, I believe it was, Governor Sam Brownback took office in Kansas and was advised by Arthur Laffer of the Laffer curve. The Laffer curve, of course, is that little piece of magic which shows that if you tax people, wealthy people, more, they will stop working because it's not worth their while. And so his plan was, let's get rid of all corporate taxes. Let's get rid of corporate taxes on S-corps, which are basically sole proprietorships, small businesses. Let's slash taxes on the rich. And what's going to happen is, even though you've cut those taxes, you're going to get so much more economic activity because you're going to be unshackling people. And because, in the right-wing mind, if money goes to a government, federal or state, in their mind, what happens is it evaporates. It doesn't in any way create jobs. It doesn't in any way build things. It all just goes into the bank accounts or the mental bank accounts of bureaucrats and then sort of just dissolves into the ether or something like that. I'm not exactly sure what it is. It's out of the private economy. And now in some other economy, I guess in some parallel universe, from which the benefits cannot cross that temporal and spatial plane. So they cut all those taxes. And Kansas continues to have a far worse economy than the states around it and the rest of the country. By any measure, non-farm payroll employment, average hours worked in manufacturing, unemployment rate, wage and salary disbursements deflated by the Consumer Price Index. Kansas has underperformed the U.S. economy ever since Brownback instituted his policies. Right. Now, the only other phenomena that has come from this is massive cuts in spending to education and to infrastructure projects, everything that you would want if you were a citizen of a state, has now been rolled back. And they're suffering from massive deficits. Now, of course, in states, you got to balance the budgets. So it's on the backs of huge cuts to public services. And that dovetails nicely with a story on how in Kansas, in addition to other states, there is becoming a huge shortage of teachers, particularly in math, science, and special education. And why might that be? Well, first off, if you crap on people and tell them that they may not have jobs, I mean, all the testing and whatnot, and right now there's a case in the New York State Supreme Court where the test score evaluations for teachers is being challenged based on the fact that the algorithms are a disaster and not terribly effective way of evaluating teacher effectiveness. You make the professions less enjoyable, less rewarding, then you publicly shame them. We have 2 or 3 Republican presidential candidates who are running one of their primary planks. Well, Chris Christie said, I would punch teachers in the mouth, or the National Teachers Union, the union that represents teachers, in the mouth. Scott Walker running on wanting to cut education to the bone. I don't know, Rick Perry, if he could ever remember one of those agencies, I think it was Department of Education he wants to cut. They run on demonizing teachers. You have this court case, the Villagara case, I believe it was, in California, which was to ostensibly attack the teacher tenure system. It's not like tenure at a college. It just basically says due process for firings. And the principle behind that case that the plaintiff was arguing is that kids in poor districts are getting a disproportionate amount of bad teachers. And the teacher tenure, the due process that these union contracts employ, make it impossible, in their words, or very difficult to fire these teachers, thereby making it impossible to hire better teachers. But there's a real problem stipulating everything that the plaintiff argues for the sake of argument here. There's another problem that they're not addressing. What makes you think there's a great teacher waiting to take that job that you have turned into a shitty job? And now we are saying that there is a serious shortage of teachers. And what's happening is states are basically rolling back their credential requirements. This is from the New York Times about a week ago. Louisville, Kentucky, Nashville, Oklahoma City, Providence, Rhode Island are among the large urban school districts having trouble finding teachers. Just 1 month before the opening of classes in Charlotte, North Carolina, they were trying to fill 200 teaching vacancies. Enrollment in California teacher preparation programs and the number of credentials issued have declined steadily since 2008 in California. Nationwide, many teachers were laid off during the recession, but the situation was particularly acute in California, which lost 82,000 jobs in schools from 2008 to 2012 because it's impossible to fire teachers. This year, districts have to fill 21,000 slots. Are you really going to go into a job where the election of a Sam Brownback or a recession means that you are target number one to lose your job? Because, we value teachers so much in this society. Education's so important. So, and would you go in as a student to a teacher's program and go into debt for this profession? It's pretty stunning. One teacher wrote in to Valerie Strauss. She's the education writer at the Washington Post. She's been teaching, believe, in public schools for a decade. Huge fan of public education, supporter of public education. She went into the teaching profession at age 40. She says that she has found it incredibly rewarding, but she writes, I just can't work in public education anymore. I've been forced to comply with mandates from the Republicans at the state level, the Democrats at the national level, that are not in the best interest of kids. I'm tired of having to perform what I consider to be educational malpractice in the name of accountability. The amount of time lost to standardized tests that are of no use to me as a classroom teacher is mind-boggling. When you add in mandatory quarterly district-wide tests, which are used to collect data that is ignored, you get a situation beyond ridiculous. Number one on my district's list of how to close the achievement gap and increase learning, making sure that all teachers have their learning goals posted every day in the form of a, quote, I can statement. I don't know how we ever got to be successful adults when we had no I can statements on the wall. In addition, due to a chronic, purposeful underfunding of public schools here in Michigan, my take-home pay has been frozen or decreased for the past 5 years. I don't see the situation getting any better in the near future. No, I did not go into teaching for the money, but I also did not go into teaching to barely scrape by either. As a 10-year teacher in my district, I would be making 16% less than a 10-year teacher when I was hired in 2006. Let me repeat that. As a 10-year teacher in my district, I would be making 16% less than a 10-year teacher was when I was hired in 2006. I don't even know if she's adjusted that for inflation. The thought of any teacher having to take a second job to support himself or herself at any point in his career is disgusting. Yet that's what I was contemplating doing at 53 with a master's degree and 12 years of experience. She's gone on, I think, to go and teach at a private school. So that's part of the agenda there too, right? Let's drive the teachers out. Let's close the schools. Let's privatize it all so that we can have education for those who can pay. And for those who won't, we'll have warehouses, essentially. There'll be desks there, and there may be some chalk and a board, but there'll be warehouses. So, hopefully we're seeing some change in the reform movement, and hopefully the next Democratic president will have a slightly different perspective on what makes for a good education. But, there's a lot of money that those Gates have, and they like to spread it around.